Wonderful surprise, and you are here without informing.
But I understood your piece.
At the very outset, I would like to congratulate the organizers of the first Animal Rights and Environmental Conference. Though it was difficult for me, but I could not say no. I could not say no because it is one of the most important topics. But it's not that easy for a judge of the Supreme Court of Pakistan to be talking about or giving a speech on animal rights. People would be justified in asking the question that when the fundamental rights of the citizens of Pakistan could not be protected, then why should the question of animal rights be discussed? But it needs to change mindsets. And the reason why it is so important to discuss animal rights is to understand, and I'll come to my judgment later, that why it is so important to acknowledge and recognize that attribute or that very thing that has intrinsic value and it needs to be protected. Because a right exists when an intrinsic value has to be protected. Ladies and gentlemen, before coming to this hall, we were discussing, and one of our former colleagues, Ayeza, she asked me, or rather, she observed how every judge is different. The law is the same, the statute is the same, but yet the same statute is interpreted differently. And I explained to her that as a student, when I was studying law, one legal theory that impressed me the most was that of the American realists. The American realists, they hold that law is not just in the statute books. Law, in fact, is the person, the psychological influences over that person, who presides the court and who has to interpret that particular law or statute. And probably the way I dealt with the case of animal rights that came to Islamabad High Court then also had something to do with my past. As a child, I had an opportunity to live in the city of London and also study for a while in a school named Primrose School. It was just a coincidence that the school, and you would also be a bit surprised. I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with how to operate it. Can you just change it for me, the slide? So, I mean, in this school, it's very interesting. I was a child, and this school was located just across the Regent Street and was a few yards from where I lived with my parents. And on the other side, in the neighborhood, was the London Zoo. So in the school we used to be taught that lions, and they would show us the images of lions in upright savannas or open woodlands. But every morning then, the roaring of the lions would be heard from the zoo. And that was confusing for a child. When the school was taught something quite different. Can you change the... And the London Zoo, you see, took a lot of pride, but it contradicted the images shown to us in the school. It contradicted the actual or how a lion lives in the nature. It is not a species that naturally can be caged, but that was a confusion which existed in my mind. But what happened, that I got an opportunity to read or study law in an institution where they had a special course on Islamic fiqh or usul al-fiqh. And you see, usul al-fiqh basically is the methodology or principle applied in Islamic jurisprudence for deriving the rulings of Islamic law. And we had some amazing scholars who taught us, because it was the early period of General Muhammad Ziaul Haq. And so there was a lot of emphasis, and we had these scholars who had come from Al-Azhar University and from around the world. And the Pakistani scholar itself, I mean, they were amazing scholars. But the first lecture on Usul al-Fiqh was an eye-opener, at least for me and for the other students as well, when we were told that the premise on which these rules and methodology is based is preservation of life. And preservation of life in every form, not just human, but in the form of an animal and in the form of plants. And the same message is common to all the religions, whether it is Judaism, whether it is Christianity. The significance of this principle played a very crucial role in developing the jurisprudence on animal rights. And this year, I was in New York. The New York bar had invited me. One of the professors from the university, he asked me a question that why did you also rely on religious grounds while writing the judgment? So I explained to him why this was one of the reasons that I had recorded in my judgment, and why right to life. From there, I went to the University of Cambridge. So before going there, one of our colleagues, who is now also in the Supreme Court, had already read at Cambridge. So I went to him and I asked him, you see, give me a suggestion. What subjects would be really useful to take when So he gave me a very, very wise advice. He said, listen, no one is going to ask you what subject you have studied. Cambridge is a place where you enjoy. So take subjects that you find the easiest so that it gives you sufficient time to enjoy. So one of the subjects that I took was civil liberties. Now civil liberties, it was a bit surprising for me that except for myself, all other students that were taken the subject of civil liberties were from the developed countries. And I wondered why should they take civil liberties as a subject. But obviously civil liberties is important because they protect humans from intrusion in their freedoms and rights by fellow humans. There have been cases of dehumanization of members of the human community. I don't know how many of you, can anyone raise your hand and anyone knows who Ayeza was? So, not you, you are one of the organizers. I was just, so at least one knows who Ayeza was. This is not very long ago. He was a teenager, a Congolese teenager, who in 1906 was brought to the United States and put in the cage where the apes were incarcerated, or they were the inmates of that cage. Ayeza was displayed as a savage native of Congolese, you see someone different, and he was displayed as a human exhibit. So there was a time when even humans, treated humans, and not very long ago, because in September 1906, the New York Times gave a headline that Bushman shares a cage with the Bronx Park apes. So humans were treated as, other than humans, they were not persons, they could not file petitions of habeas corpus, but humans were doing this to humans. But Ayeza wasn't one of them. Saranji Barkman was a woman who in 1810 was brought from South Africa to England, and where she was displayed as an exhibit before paid crowds. And again, you see, till the 50s, 1950s, that also is not long ago. There used to be human zoos, and there were even human zoos in the country or the city which today symbolizes the human rights. Even Geneva had human zoos. The reason why I'm emphasizing all this is that yes, civil liberties was extremely important because humans were treating humans as non-humans. They were not considered as persons for the purposes of a habeas corpus petition. Ayeza couldn't go to the court and ask for a habeas corpus petition. So, and again you see a marvelous and a legend Dr. David Attenborough. And very rightly he has stated that it seems very unfair that man should have chosen the gorilla to symbolize all that is aggressive and violent, when that's the one thing the gorilla is not, and we are. And we certainly are aggressive. The powerful throughout human history the way we have treated humans, that is what we have done. The non-human species, they don't attack humans unless they feel threatened, unless they are hungry. But humans have destroyed humans, humans have brutally killed humans, humans don't hesitate in destroying the habitats, the environment. It's not the non-human species. So, even you see, the perceptions need to be redefined. And this was the time when I was in the Islamabad High Court. It was a challenging time. It was a challenging time because even then, I was elevated as the Chief Justice in 2018 and served as the Chief Justice till 2022. And everyone knows, it is no more a secret, that the country, despite there being an elected parliament and elected government, was not governed under the Constitution. Very openly everyone was saying, including the then government, that there was a hybrid regime. And the Constitutional Court had a very, very important role to play. It had the responsibility of protecting fundamental rights of humans, of the citizens. And as a Constitutional Court, see, it was inundated with petitions where the aggrieved were complaining about violation of fundamental rights. And I can claim with confidence that it was only the Islamabad High Court which was entertaining then the enforced disappearances petitions. The only constitutional court that has rendered a judgment, and it is part of the statute books on enforced disappearances, is from the Islamabad High Court. Again, you see, the prisoner's rights judgment. There were so many fundamental rights issues, the freedom of expression. And this is what the Islamabad High Court, which was emerging as an independent constitutional court, was dealing with. And people had confidence. That is why so many petitions were coming to the Islamabad High Court. And the jurisprudence that has developed is part of the statute of the reported cases right now. And while the Islamabad High Court was dealing with issues relating to violation of fundamental rights, these three petitions landed up and were fixed before the bench, or rather my bench. And for me, these three are the unsung heroes. They gave the court an opportunity. And it was, you see, as I said, the court was dealing with serious fundamental rights issues at that time. And in one petition, it was about a bear, and the Islamabad Zoo had refused to hand over the zoo so that it can be taken to a sanctuary in Balkazar. And it was a pleasant surprise for me. I never knew that there was a bear sanctuary in Balkazar. There are some very good things that are happening in Pakistan as well. In the other petition, Dr. Naseem Umar, who nobody knows, he brought a petition, but the prayer that was sought in the petition was welfare focused. It was for an elephant Kavan. And Kavan has a very, very interesting story. Kavan's story, in fact, also reflects the status of fundamental rights and how the country has been governed for the past 77 years. There have been authoritarian regimes, and one of the most ruthless authoritarian regimes was that of General Ziaul. Not very far from here, in the Lahore fort, torture cells were established, where for months citizens were tortured only for holding certain political views and political opinions. An elected Prime Minister, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto Shaheed, was removed unconstitutionally, and regrettably the judiciary and even the Supreme Court was used to murder him, to kill him. And after 40 years, the Supreme Court acknowledged that it was a murder and that the Supreme Court was used for that purpose. It was at this time that the same ruler, General Ziaul, made a request to the government of Sri Lanka that his daughter wished to have a baby elephant. So one government made a request to another government, and that government virtually kidnapped a 3-year-old baby elephant, separated it from its herd. And elephants are emotionally and behaviorally very, very complex and very sensitive species. They are as sensitive as humans. When an infant is born, a baby is born, the elephants, the mother, the sisters, the herd, they actually celebrate. They grieve when someone is lost. They are sentient beings. And this 3-year-old baby was flown to Pakistan, presented to the then ruler of Pakistan, and was kept in the backyard till it started growing. And then they decided to establish a zoo and keep this kidnapped baby in that zoo for entertainment of humans. Imagine such a thing happening to a human. And when I was thinking about this, since at the same time I was also dealing with cases of enforced disappearances. As a judge, one could feel the pain through which the loved ones have to go when someone becomes a victim of enforced disappearance. Kavan, as a baby, was a victim of enforced disappearance. Its bodily integrity was violated. So interestingly, these 3 petitions, when they were taken up, I also decided to appoint an amicus, and the word Wildlife Fund Pakistan also gave me a consultant. The consultant did a good job and provided all the details of the inmates of those that zoo. And some of the inmates were in terrible condition. It's been a pleasant surprise that Dr. Amir Khalid is here, because he was a great help. There were so many other inmates of that zoo, particularly the marsh crocodile, the two Himalayan bears, emitted Himalayan bears. The nature has created Himalayan bears to live in the highest plateau of Uttarakhand and not in Islamabad. One of the bears, their names were Susie and Bubby. One of them was suffering badly because it had an open wound. And there was no medical facility in Islamabad, in Pakistan, which would treat that bear. So, the difficulty for the court was, the prayers sought were not right-based. The prayers sought were only focused on improving the welfare of, in fact, Kavan, one animal, and the stray dogs. That was the other prayer. Now as a court, I was conscious of the fact that the judgment would also be challenged. Interestingly, no lawyer was ready to argue the right-based case for all the animals. Even the consultant of World Wildlife Fund Pakistan was not willing to go to that extent. Their report also focused on improving the conditions within the zoo for the inmates. So what to do? All these inmates, as far as I was concerned, they had rights. They could not be deprived of their natural habitats, and that was a very, very crucial right that everyone had. How to enforce that right? So, the first thing that I did was to survey the jurisprudence from the other jurisdictions. The jurisprudence was very, very interesting. Like, for instance, in Argentina, only to the extent of chimpanzees, the rights were to some extent indirectly recognized, but they were on the basis of the attributes which they shared with humans. So again, it was in the context of humans. In India, they interpreted their right to life of the Constitution under Article 21 and declared that even the bulls, you see in this case, enjoyed the same rights. But subsequently, the Indian Supreme Court has overturned that judgment. In the United States, it was even more interesting. It was interesting because in the United States, the petitions were filed seeking the writ of habeas corpus, and it was for an elephant, Happy, who is still an inmate of the Bronx Zoo. Professor Stephen Wise, who passed away this year, I must acknowledge his contribution because he was the one who was pursuing the case of Happy. The Supreme Court, the New York Supreme Court, and then its appellate court, the judges were very, very sympathetic. They were sympathetic. They said very nice things about Happy, about elephants, how important it was. But then you see, they would come to the conclusion that Happy or any other non-human species was not a person, and only a person would be granted the writ of habeas corpus. Recently, when I was at the New York bar, the chief judge, who had also rendered a judgment on Happy, he said something very interesting in his speech. He said that he and I shared one thing, that both of us have authored judgments in cases of elephants, but that he could not succeed while Pakistani court did succeed in implementing its judgment. So, we have, after surveying all the judgments, I came to the conclusion that all the constitutions have been drafted and promulgated by humans to organize themselves, to govern themselves. They are not in the context of life other than human life. So I realized that that was the confusion. That is why even our constitution is only focused on the rights of humans. That is why a person as defined in our constitution is restricted to a human. Though even our constitution protects or guarantees the right to life. But that right to life is only and only restricted to a human. So what, and this is how you see the jurisprudence that I had laid. That what is the difference between a life of a human and a non-human? It's this attribute, life, which creates a right. A right exists when a thing has an intrinsic value, and that is to be protected. And I'll go back to the fundamental principle of preservation of life that also emanates from the same concept. So, the jurisprudence that was evolved, and the reason why it was declared by the Islamabad High Court that every non-human species has natural rights, was based on this very premise, that it is the attribute of life. No human has a right to enjoy its natural habitat. No non-human can be deprived of its habitat. And if this right is accepted, the looming threat of climate change can be dealt with effectively. If the habitats are protected, if the biodiversity, the fauna, flora automatically gets protected. And it's, again you see, it wasn't just rendering this judgment. There was then very strong opposition. And surprisingly, the opposition came from the Ministry of Climate Change, the federal government, and they filed a review. The review also had to be dismissed. And they had no reason. They had no ground for the review. It was probably more of a problem of ego. Because I declared shifting of all the inmates within Marghazar Zoo to their natural habitats. Kavan had to go to Cambodia. The two bears to a sanctuary in Jordan. The monkeys who were natives of Margala Hills and Margala Forest were imprisoned within their own natural habitat. They had to be set free. Many birds had to be set free. It has never happened. The most difficult task for the court was to ensure that its judgment is implemented. Because if a court cannot implement its judgment, it undermines the very existence of that court. But I must acknowledge the role played by Mr. Amir Khalil, Dr. Amir Khalil, who's here with us today, his organization. And it was at this stage that the renowned singer of United States, Cher, she stepped in. She offered to pay the expenses because it was a very, very expensive, costly exercise to shift Kavan from Pakistan to Cambodia. She also decided to visit Pakistan, and that is what changed the decision of the government of Pakistan. They also realized that internationally it has gone as a huge credit to Pakistan and its people for evolving a jurisprudence which was first of its kind internationally. The only other jurisdiction other than Pakistan where the rights of animal species or non-human species have been explicitly recognized is Ecuador. But again, Ecuador Constitutional Court had the advantage that their constitution provides for a constitutional right relating to protection of nature. Pakistan was and still is the first jurisdiction which explicitly recognized the rights on the basis of life having intrinsic value and a duty cast upon humans to protect it. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a very happy moment when ultimately the judgment was implemented and Kavan became a symbol, an example for the rest of the world to follow. Regrettably, and again, you see, I am very, very humbled. But the credit is that of Pakistan and Pakistani nation, that today the judgment of Islamabad High Court is quoted in other jurisdictions. In every university which offers the subject of animal rights, the judgment of Islamabad High Court is discussed as one of the leading judgments. It is being discussed. It will bring about an international change. Figuratively, the zoos across this country still exist. Non-human species have been deprived of their natural habitats, of their liberty, of their bodily integrity. We need to change. We need to realize that humans could go extinct if they delay recognition of the rights of non-human species. The habitats exist to protect life, and more so the life of humans. If the habitats are gone because of human greed, there will be no human life on this planet. So it is for the humans to decide that while they are suppressing or violating the rights of each other, of other humans, at least for their own survival, they need to protect the habitats, the environment, and they can only do that by recognizing and protecting the rights of non-human species. ladies and gentlemen, this was again, you see, another judgment. It's not just one judgment that came to the Islamabad High Court. In late 50s, a Greek town planner came to Pakistan and prepared a wonderful master plan for Islamabad to develop. And the most impressive aspect of that master plan was that the Greek town planner had ensured to protect the environmentally sensitive areas and also to protect the environment. The Margala Hills were notified as a protected forest area in 1960. And the powerful military establishment claimed ownership of 8,000 acres of. And this is a judgment which the High Court had to render. And again recognize that not just the animal species, even the flora and fauna were living organisms and need to be protected. They also share the attribute of life with the humans, and the humans' welfare, their existence depends on protection of these areas. Another judgment, the same town planner, and according to his scheme, the area which is known as Bani Gala was notified and declared as a wildlife sanctuary. But today, what happened to that wildlife sanctuary? If anyone has some time, must read the judgment that was also handed down by the Islamabad High Court and also then upheld by the Supreme Court. But that notified wildlife sanctuary does not exist. It's the elite who have their palatial houses there. They are enjoying at the cost of the wildlife. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can't keep the animal species against their rights in cages. And it's very rightly said that the only creature on earth whose natural habitat is a zoo is the zookeeper. It is for us humans and the human species to decide whether we want to survive on this planet. If we do, then we have no option but to recognize the rights of every species that possesses life. And it is that intrinsic value of life that needs to be protected. With these words, I am grateful for your patience and thank you very much.